Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of View from the Other Side. Tonight I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Jonny Gould from the Aston Villa Supporters Trust. Jonny's a journalist and a commentator. Jonny, welcome to View from the Other Side and welcome back to the Premier League.
Oh, Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to join you, and particularly for that welcome. I would like to think that a Premier League without Aston Villa was a poorer league. I mean, Aston Villa are, by most reckonings, either the 5th or 6th most successful English team of all time in terms of cup winning. And when we went down, it was a bit like if Everton would have gone down, if Spurs or Chelsea would have gone down. And so for us to come back in 3 seasons, considering the helter-skelter of financial trouble that we were in, is a massive sense of relief. And now we're back. We don't want all that terrible upheaval to happen again.
Yeah, it was. You've just hit the nail on the head for me. When Aston Villa went down, it was a big loss to the Premier League, and a lot of pundits and fans alike are happy that Villa are back in the league. I, for one, am, especially with the history that both Everton and Aston Villa have got. It goes right back to the 22nd of September 1888, this fixture. For the historians, Queen Victoria was on the throne. That's how long ago it was. And the first game, Villa won that game 2-1, and it was watched by 5,000 home fans. Since then, Villa have won 80, drawn 58, and lost 82.
Well, it is quite equal, and when you consider that the fixture between Aston Villa and Everton, Chris, as you highlight there, goes back to the very first days of the Football League. It is the world's oldest and most played football rivalry, either of club or country. They talk about England v Scotland being the oldest international, and it might be, but the game that's been played most of all between 2 clubs anywhere in the world is Aston Villa versus Everton. And 2 of the original 12 clubs we are. As you say, we have between us spent most of our lives in the top flight. It is very equal. Everton might be slight favourites when they come to Villa Park on Friday, but we need to get our acts together. We've lost our first 2. Harshly dealt with, perhaps, but that is the nature of the Premier League, us coming up from the Championship. And with Everton being, I think, perhaps a slightly more settled side, if we're going to earn our first points of the season, we're really, really going to have to produce something much more secure than we've done in the first 2 games at Tottenham and at home to Bournemouth.
Sure, yeah, I totally agree. I think you were really unlucky in the Bournemouth game. I watched that game again, and Villa had 63% possession and 22 shots on goal. 7 of them were on target. The goal as well was an absolute cracker from, is it Louise, is it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was a rearguard action, and of course, as it turned out, we'd lost the game within the first quarter hour.
That's right, yeah.
A penalty which Tom Heaton conceded, and then a deflected Harry Wilson shot. Of course he was going to score on his debut for Bournemouth. He was a player that we had targeted, and very, very well Harry Wilson had done last season in the Championship. We knew all about him. Bournemouth will have been happy with that result because their away form had been very, very reckless last season. Yeah. And professionally, I mean, a lot of Villa fans didn't like the way that Bournemouth cynically get down the game, but we're going to have to be a little bit more crafty about the football we play. I mean, after all, as you say, after we went down 2-0, we were the better side. We had shots on goal. Louise's fantastic for 2-1 really meant we pushed forward to try and get that equaliser, but Bournemouth knew they were the weaker side, and we were a little bit cynical in holding on to their victory, but victory they achieved and we didn't. Yeah. So I have to tell you that in competing well, I think, for the first 3 quarters of the game at Spurs and for the last 3 quarters of the game against Bournemouth, didn't earn us any prize, didn't earn us any points.
Yeah.
So I think we have to learn from that, and I think Dean Smith is the man to do that. And I would like to see us progress a little bit away from silly mistakes which you dear, in the Premier League. And again, Everton, I think, in many ways, is a sterner test at home than Bournemouth. Yeah. So, I mean, if we get a point or 3 points, I'll be delighted. But if we get a third defeat, it depends on the manner of that performance. As a Villa fan, we're not losing our cool. We know that it is a learning curve. It's a steep one by the first 2 games reckonings, but Everton come along and we've really got to be on our game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore on that one. After the game, your manager said Villa were taught a harsh lesson. Do you agree with that? Do you think you should have took your chances more as well? I think your back four looked a little bit uneasy. Do you think over time that they'll gel a little bit better, your back four, as the season goes on?
I think so. I mean, again, we've got choice at the back. I mean, we're quite happy with Engels and Mings. They were superb against Spurs for the first 75 minutes. And, of course, we played the Champions League finalists, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, that really was... I mean, we weren't exactly playing a Premier League side at Spurs. We were playing, essentially, a Champions League tie. Yeah. And we, held our own brilliantly. And, of course, they punished us dearly when Eriksen came on, a world-class player. Yeah. And did us 3-1. We've kind of run out of puff. But yes, we've got choice at the back. We've got Neil Taylor and El Mohammadi at left and right back respectively, and that could change. Dean Smith has been very, very good in management, electing to play El Mohammadi, who's just come back from the African Cup of Nations, who's absolutely full of beans and full of match fitness. Some fans are saying that he hasn't got the step up to the Premier League. I would disagree with that. I would say he was a player who'd spent most of his time playing Premier League football. When you think about what he'd done with Hull City and Sunderland,
he played
the cup final.
He had the time at Hull.
Exactly, he's an Egyptian international. The guy is an outstanding pro. And Neil Taylor also has his fair share of experience in the Premier League with Swansea City. And Dean Smith elected to put those boys in because he wanted the hub of the team that earned us promotion to be given that chance in the Premier League. And Taylor, I think, has taken that chance, although Villa fans would say we've got a better option having signed Southampton's Matt Targett at left-back. Right, yeah. And the same goes at right-back with El Mohammadi. We've got Frederick Gilbert, who come in from Caen, who we signed last season, and we loaned him back to Caen.
Right.
So whether Dean continues with El Mohammadi and with Neil Taylor remains to be seen, but we do have options. As for Mings and Engels, I think they are a bright spot. They have developed a defensive partnership, which I think Villa fans can be proud of so far. And I think they will become, I hope, one of the better and more famous defensive partnerships as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they'll gel a little bit more, like you said, as the season progresses. As for our defence, well, in the summer we were all a little bit nervous. Kurt Zuma never quite got over the line for us. So for us it'll be Michael Keane and Yerry Mina. And they've been brilliant, touch wood, up to now. Conceded no goals. Yerry Mina had a good game on Saturday. Fantastic defending. Michael Keane again. When he first come along at Everton, he didn't have a good season. And there was the boo boys were on his back. He's learnt a lot, Michael Keane. He's getting stronger and stronger, and to me, he could be a potential future captain for Everton. The left back position. The last time I heard, Lucas Digne might not be playing at left back on Friday night. The rumour around the mill is he's got a groin strain or a thigh strain, so it looks like Leighton Baines could step in there. That is me worry down that left side if that is the case. Hopefully Lucas Digne will have a late fitness test and get back in there. The right side will be good old Seamus Coleman getting down that right hand side. I think in our midfield JB Gabaman will be in there with Andre Gomez. On the right wing will be Richarlison. The left winger will be Bernard. I'd like to see Moise Keane start against Villa, but I think he'll stick with the same and go with Sigurdsson with Calvert-Lewin. I don't like that. I'd rather play Moise Keane across a front three. To me, Sigurdsson slows us down a little bit. Now, a lot of Blues might be shouting there, but he was up there, our top goal scorer last season, Gylfi Sigurdsson, with 12 goals, but it just seems slow, the build-up when we've got him in the side. I'd like to see a front three tomorrow on Friday night, of Richarlison, Moise Kean and Bernard. But like I say, I think he'll stick with Gylfi and Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
I mean, you have just mentioned, Chris, a roster of players that speak of Premier League quality in more than the top half of the table.
Yeah.
And, Michael Keane, I think, was signed from Burnley. And is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a player of Sean Dyche quality that I think Everton came along and bust Burnley with some Premier League style transfer money for. So you've signed a player who I do believe, could become, like you say, an Everton captain of the future. Gylfi Sigurdsson was a very, very expensive signing from Swansea City and is an absolutely top draw player. Whether he slows down play or not, I mean, he's an outstanding opposition player from an Aston Villa point of view. We'll be looking out for him. Moise Kean, I think, was one of the signings of the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, he really burst onto the scene in the Champions League for Juventus, and for Everton to sign him, I think, was one of the captures of the summer. So look, you've got players all over the park, and Seamus Coleman is... Everton have this propensity for having Premier League quality players for their whole careers. I'm thinking of players like Osman as well, who was such a great servant for Everton.
Yeah, he liked popping up against Villa. I remember him scoring once or twice against.
What a very good player he was. And who's the other guy whose first name was Tony, who played for Everton for 100 years?
Tony, halfway line, Hibbert.
Tony Hibbert.
Tony Hibbert to get to the halfway line, and that'll be it.
There is an unsung hero who just played for Everton for about 10 centuries that I always think his whole career was in the Premier League. Excellent stuff. So I'll be looking out for I mean, Villa are going to have to be absolutely on their game to do that.
I think it'll be a hard game. I think it'll be a lot closer and a lot tighter than a lot of people think. I really do. I think Everton might find it hard to break Villa down. I think our record will come to an end for conceding goals. I think Villa will score on Friday night.
I think we'll score as well.
A night game under the lights. Friday night, Villa away. I think it's going to be tight. And I do think there's going to be goals as well.
Well, we'll be playing in front of a capacity crowd. The atmosphere against Bournemouth, our first Premier League game for 3 seasons, was something else. It was slightly muted by the sort of early 2-0 setback, but at 0-0 at Villa Park, under the floodlights, like you say, on telly at Sky as well, will be adding a little bit of pressure and occasion, I think, to both sets of players. Mm-hmm. And again, I am very keen. I know this is an Everton podcast, but I'm very keen on us scoring first. Because if you score first under the circumstances of our start to the season, again, we'll be sort of chasing again, and I don't really want that to happen for us.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the average age of Villa is 24 and a half. Do you think, as a Villa fan, that might be a problem this season with not having the experience in there of an older general type player?
Well, we signed a dozen players, and what was highlighted by them was their comparative youth and their relative inexperience in the Premier League. But that is what our chief executive, Christian Purslow, was after. Mm-hmm. He was after a bit of resale value. Mm-hmm. Having said all that, someone who does drag up the average age a few quid is 33-year-old goalkeeper Tom Heaton, who has bags of Premier League experience, and of course the Southampton left-back Matt Targett. Mm-hmm. I will be looking to both those guys, and of course Mings as well has Premier League experience with Bournemouth. I'll be looking to those guys to be an influence in the dressing room when and if they start games regularly. Tom Heaton is obviously going to be our first choice keeper right through the Premier League season. But yes, that does hint on 2 policies there that if we were to sign young players from the Premier League, we'd be paying 30-40 million pounds. So we've been a bit clever going abroad, signing players who play in the Dean Smith way. And of course there are players like Jota and 1 or 2 other players that he's he knows of, that he wanted to sign for Brentford or did play for him at Brentford, that he knows. So, yes, there is a little bit of a deficit of Premier League quality, but I think we've shown enough in the first 2 games to say that we can acclimatise to the top division. I mean, Trezeguet and Wesley,
good players.
They are good players, and we're starting to see flashes of why we bought them. And of course, Douglas Luiz, who made his debut against Bournemouth, scored that fantastic goal, came in from Manchester City. He was never going to get near the first team there, was he? With all the pick of players that they get at City.
They've got. I mean, they're just outstanding all over the park.
They are. And I am confident that even though we lack a little bit of experience in the Premier League, I think they're keen to learn, they're keen to play, and Dean Smith is a good manager who will get the best out of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think Villa will stay up. And I think that's the objective of Villa for this season, from an Everton point of view. I think is to stay up and push on.
I think we're a bit more ambitious than that, though, Chris.
Yeah,
I do. I think we are.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gunning for 17th spot. I think we are
top half finish. I'd say.
10th, whatever the ambition is. In our Villa Trust podcast, my good friend Howard Hodgson predicted we'd finish 14th, and I was a bit more ballsy and said we'd finish 10th. Maybe that was a little bit ambitious, but somewhere around those 2 positions, I think, is where the hub of Aston Villa fans would believe. And you look at Wolves and you look at Burnley over the last couple of seasons, and you can see that there is scope for getting points off other like-level teams. We might lose at home to Spurs, home and away. We might lose to Manchester City, get tonked 5 or 6 at the Etihad. We might get battered at Liverpool.
Don't be embarrassed about that. That's going to happen to a lot of teams this year at the Etihad.
There are going to be 3 games, but when we come up against, with all due respect, I don't know, Leicester City or Southampton, Newcastle United, I'm gunning for us to get all 3 points.
Yeah, I when you's come up, I thought a good top half finish, 10th, 11th, and then build on from there.
Amazing.
And that'll be a great season, I think, for Villa, and then you build on and you move on from there, don't you?
Very much so. And we're here to stay this time. We've got a very good CEO in Christian Perslow. We have very committed owners in Nawaz Sharif and Wes Edens, and you can see that their purchase of the club and paying off all the debts and really backing Dean Smith to the hilt with £120 million of expenditure in the summer shows that we've got a side that needs to compete. It needs to compete fast. We're not going to pull up trees in year 1. We might surprise a few, but we're here to stay. This is not a one-season wonder. This is 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons to get ourselves together and maybe look at Everton and see that there's a possibility that we can really be something just as you've been over the many years, and particularly with Roberto Martinez in recent seasons.
Yeah, Roberto Martinez's first season was absolutely fantastic.
It was amazing.
I think it was the highest tally we'd ever finished on in the Premier League. And I think as well, because no disrespect to David Moyes, but he never ever really went for it in games. He didn't go attack. He'd be very cautious, David Moyes. So for 10 years we had that cautiousness play. And then Martinez come in and just ripped up the rule book. And we were playing with right wingers and we were overlapping. And that first season, it was just to see Everton play like that was, it was, my granddad said to me it was similar to Everton in the 60s with the School of Science.
And if you know your history, it made your heart go, woo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Now, listen, I always remember when Roberto Martinez came in at Wigan. Of course, they just won the FA Cup and got relegated.
Yeah.
He said, I want us to qualify for the Champions League. I remember him saying it in the news conference.
And we all laughed.
I thought, oh, blimey.
Yeah.
He's gunning to get sacked, isn't he? And you did it, didn't you?
We just missed out.
Oh, you just missed out, right?
Just missed out. We got in the. Did we get in the Europa League that season? I think we got in the Europa League.
I think you finished 5th, did you? Something like that.
Yeah, it was there or thereabouts, and a lot of people I laughed. I thought, oh no, what's he said that for? Why has he said that? And then we started playing football like that, and it was aye. Hang on a minute, but the players believed him, and then it sort of it went stale pretty quickly.
Well, you do know what happened, don't you? That he turned down Aston Villa without even meeting us and favoured Everton.
I did not know that, no.
Yeah, he didn't fancy... He's turned down Villa twice, so he's not our best mate, Roberto Martinez. But I'll tell you someone else who is going to avoid the booze this time, because I think he's injured.
Fabian
Delph.
That is a talking point for the two of us. That is a talking point. I've never seen him play live. I've obviously only seen him a few times from Manchester City. You know more about him. Tell us, a little bit about him if you can.
Well, he's an absolutely class player on the field, and he had early promise at Leeds United, and Arsene Wenger took a look at him for Arsenal, and in the end, a very buoyant Martin O'Neill brought him as a young man to Aston Villa to try and fulfil his potential in the Premier League with us, and this was alongside Ashley Young, who'd we'd signed from Watford, who we'd beat off Spurs to sign. So this was a very buoyant Aston Villa in the early days of Martin O'Neill, and this was a period where Villa constantly finished 6th.
That's right,
We finished 6th 3 seasons in a row, and we were just outside the Champions League positions, and we could have qualified one year, but failed, and that kind of undid all the Martin O'Neill project, and he played a weakened side in the last 8 of the UEFA Cup, and
you tipped us to the Europa League a few times on the bounce under Martin O'Neill.
Yes, we did.
There was a bit of a rivalry there.
There was, and he played a weakened side in the quarter-finals of the UEFA Cup in Moscow because he thought we'd finish 4th in the Premier League and qualify for the Champions League, and we did neither. And it was a 2-2 draw with Stoke City without getting too involved in that, with John Carew nearly settling the game at the end. And actually that ended up with O'Neill leaving the club on the eve of the season, and that was the beginning of a tremendous downfall for Villa, which actually took us 10 years to recover from. And Delph was a player who was part of that ambition. He signed a contract, he was our skipper, and suddenly from nowhere I got wind that he might be leaving for Liverpool, with Jordan Ibe coming the other way.
Right.
Manchester City popped in, signed him from absolutely nowhere for virtually no money at all, and that is basically why he's extremely unpopular at Villa Park. But for Everton, he's going to be one hell of a player. I think he's a really, really good signing. No history, no baggage, good player at Man City, top England international, and, putting our emotions to one side, Fabian Delph is a Premier League quality player who'll do get Everton, good. He'll be a regular.
Yeah, I was impressed when we brought him in, when we brought Fabian Delph in for 8 million as well. I thought it's
cheap.
And that's loose change when it comes to Premier League money. I mean, the money that's getting thrown around, I thought that was a steal. I think he'll fit in well at the Everton side. I think we've brought him in for the experience, the mouth as well. Getting the younger players going in the dressing room. We lost Jagielka, well, we didn't lose Jagielka. We sold him and let him go. And I think we're going to miss that Everton this season is the mouth and the experience to, if we do go to Anfield and it is 0-0 at half time, if Fabian Delph can go, okay lads, let's remain calm. We're still in the game. It's 0-0. That type of mentality is what I like about Fabian Delph. I think he'll fit in great and he'll do well at Everton. Well, he won't start every game, but he'll be on the bench.
That's interesting you say that, because I look at a player of Fabian Delph's quality and think once he's match fit and ready after injury, he would be among the first 3 or 4 names on the team sheet. But maybe you've got a big enough squad to rotate. But I think Delph's of the quality to be a regular at Everton.
I would imagine so. But yeah, something makes me think the JP Gbamin and Andre Gomez is going to be the regular fixture in the centre of midfield. But he can play. Am I right in saying he can play right back as well? Fabian Delph.
Fabian Delph can play across midfield, and I mean, as a right-footed player, he can do that.
Yeah, it was just a few Manchester City fans said they played him at right wing back once or twice, which I found really interesting. But he was at Manchester City, and it was under Pep Guardiola, so I suppose under Pep Guardiola you could do anything, couldn't you, really, as a player?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a utility player. He's an intelligent player,
yeah.
And I think he'll create space. I think he'll link with Keane quite well as a player who can move into the box and create decoy for your other players around. I think he's, I'm sort of forgetting what he did to us,
yeah.
which precipitated our relegation, and thinking that actually he's actually a top player.
I think he was brought in to replace another ex-Aston Villa player as well, Idrissa Gana Gueye.
Oh yeah.
What a player! What a player.
I mean, to think that he was part of a team that was one of the worst Premier League teams of all time. We knew he was a good player.
Yeah.
We just couldn't get any of them to play for us.
Yeah.
And there he is. He's got his dream move to Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, he has. And all the best to him as well. And he wanted to go in January, and he kept his head down. Everton said no, and he kept working. And that lad, modern day football, he could have come out at any moment and slag the club off and this, that, and he didn't. He got his head down. He worked hard, and fair play to him. And most Evertonians wish him all the best.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. Delph reminds me of someone else who made exactly the same career path move, a solid regular international on the left side. I'm thinking of Gareth Barry.
Oh, Gareth Barry.
I mean, one of the most successful English Premier League players of all time, and had one hell of a career at Aston Villa.
Oh, fantastic.
And he's much loved at Villa, and joined City when they weren't actually up to much. They were just about in the Frank Sinatra era, weren't they?
Yeah.
Just before... just before, obviously the billionaires came in and sorted it all out. Yeah. And he got his dream move. Was excellent at City as well. I think, didn't he win the league or the FA Cup?
Yeah,
there?
I think he won the league and the FA Cup.
Yeah, I mean, there we go. He had a great career. He was a good England international. And of course, he did great at Everton as well.
He did, yeah. I think it was 2013, the summer of 2013. In that same window, Romelu Lukaku came in, and Gerard Deulofeu came in that window. I was on holiday in Turkey at the time, and my brother texted me, and the first text message, we've just got Romelu Lukaku on loan, and the second one was, we've just signed Gareth Barry on a free. And I thought, hey, hang about, that's a cracking move. And he was brilliant for his Gareth Barry. He was class, and even when he left us and went to, I think he went to West Brom after Everton.
He did.
He was still doing it there.
Yeah, there was talk about him coming back home, but that never happened, and it's okay.
Yeah,
but he's always welcome at Villa Park, and he had such a long career at Villa, and he was such a good player for us in the O'Neill side, who kept on finishing sixth largely. Yeah. But he joined us as a kid from Brighton. We did one of those kind of dodgy youth policy nicking from a smaller club thing. Yeah. And he was at Villa for a very, very long time.
He was. He had a glittering career there, didn't he?
He did.
He was, like you said, he was well respected. Let's round it off. The last time we were at Villa Park, it was in March of 2016, and we won 3-1.
Oh.
This game might be remembered for Villa fans. It was... obviously that season relegation was imminent. On the 74th minute there was a walkout. Do you remember that game?
I do.
It was
one of our darkest moments, really, because we had circulated around the relegation plug hole for about 3 to 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And we had nowhere to go. We knew as near back probably as December that season that relegation was almost a foregone conclusion, and we'd had enough, and we were actually being laughed at on Twitter. Like, there were other fans wishing us relegation because we were such failure.
I remember.
It was embarrassing, humiliating, actually, and I was a bit ashamed, actually. I must confess about it. But I tell you what, it's a different Villa Park now, a different ownership. It's amazing, not just what 3 years has made, but actually what 9 months has made since those owners have come in. Yeah. It's a different Villa Park. I hope it's a different result.
I don't.
Don't be greedy. You can win by 1 goal.
That's I think it'll be a hard game, hard-fought game. I think it'll be a lot of a midfield battle going on. My prediction for the game is I'm going to go for 2-1. A very tight 2-1, I think.
Well, I think, like you, both teams will score.
Yeah.
I would like to think we're going to score first, because we haven't done this season so far.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps in the second half, Everton might equalise. I'm going for a 1-1.
Yeah.
And all I want to see from Aston Villa this time is, even if we don't secure a victory, if we secure our first point of the season and don't concede through sloppiness or mistakes or a lapse of concentration, concede less, apply ourselves across the 90 minutes more. I just want to see a bit of an improvement and progress on Spurs and Bournemouth. That's what I want to see. And listen, if we get a win, it's great, but I think a 1-1 draw is where I am at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm sticking for 2-1. I'm going to go for 2-1. I'm going down Friday night. I'm taking time off work, so the Blues better not.
Well, enjoy yourself.
I will do. If there is any Everton fans listening, do you recommend a neutral pub anywhere near the ground, or is there anywhere around Aston Villa?
Oh dear, actually, a neutral. Well, actually, you could drink in the city centre,
right.
And then make your way on the train to either Aston Station and walk down Lovers Walk, or Whitton Station and just turn left towards the ground. But yes, there's plenty of stuff in the city centre. The city centre is a nice place to be, actually.
Right.
I would do that, and then sort of get back on the train at New Street.
Yeah.
Because what's going on at New Street now is it's been developed really completely since you were last there, and there's lots of sort of entertainment and drinking and eating to be getting on with at New Street before popping back on the train and going a couple of stops to Whitton or Aston. Whitton's probably a bit better because it sort of focuses you towards the away end of the ground.
Excellent.
Hey, by the way, when we won the league in 1981, you were one of the only teams to come to Villa Park and win. And it was at the beginning of the season you won 2-0.
Oh yeah, we give you the kick then.
Yeah, but by the time we went to Goodison, we were on our game. Yeah. We won 3-1, and Tony Morley scored the goal of the season.
Right. Well, I did forget to bring it up. My dad asked me to mention the 77 Cup final.
Oh yeah.
He was at all three of them. My dad.
Yeah, we're still playing it, aren't we?
Yeah. And my granddad. The two of them went down to all three of the games, and obviously, as you know, Villa went on to win 2-1. Brian Little got 2, and Chris Nichol got the other one.
It was 3-2, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, 3-2. That was it. Yeah.
And then we signed Ken McNaught.
Sorry.
Off you. Then we signed Ken McNaught.
Was that summer?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. Mick
but
Lyons,
yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
Mick Lyons and Bob Latchford scored for Everton that day.
Oh, right. Okay, and I think you had Mike Pedgick in your team, and we signed him as well.
There you go. There's another player and another link to Everton. Right.
Exactly.
Those of you that have listened to the podcast, I do appreciate your time for listening to episode 2. It will be every away opponent that we come up against. I will try my best to contact an away fan. Jonny, thanks a lot for your time.
Pleasure, Chris. Enjoy the game. Good luck.
I will do. And you as well. Good luck. And once again, everyone that's listening, please like and subscribe the video. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.